The checkpoint shimmered under the brutal light of three suns, each casting jagged shadows across the sand-choked landscape. Thick walls of alloy and stone ringed the perimeter, bristling with anti-orbital cannons and surveillance towers like porcupine quills. Behind those walls, the outpost pulsed with nervous energy, a crossroads where alliances faltered, where border skirmishes began with a poorly timed sneer. On the western approach, a lone figure emerged from the heat haze. He walked with the sluggish gait of exhaustion, the kind that settled into bones and stayed. Dust clung to every inch of his clothing, the fabric sun-bleached and sweat-stained. A wide-brimmed hat shielded his face, and a weathered pack bounced against his back with each step. He didn't look up at the mounted spotlights, or the glint of sniper optics tracking his every move. He just kept walking. From a balcony above the checkpoint gate, Guard Captain Ulrichs leaned forward and squinted through his ocular band. The figure was human tall by some species standards, average by others but visibly worn down, limping slightly on the left leg, possibly favoring the hip. "Another one," Ulrichs muttered with a breathy chuckle. "Stray from the migration lanes, looks like. Probably begging passage." Beside him, two junior guards perked up. Tarsk, the larger of the two, let out a low cackling sound. "Humans walk like broken machines. It's the knees, all that bending." "They always carry junk," added the smaller one. Koeth, already rubbing his claws together. "They think pockets full of trash will save them, like charms." Ulrichs nodded, amused. "Let's make this one quick." The gate's bulkhead groaned as it opened, releasing a hiss of sterilized air. The traveler stepped into the shade without breaking stride, but his shoulders dipped as if the coolness made him suddenly aware of how long he'd been in the heat. 4 guards met him, Ulrichs, Tarsk, Koeth, and one silent drone for recording. "Name," Ulrichs barked, not bothering with a greeting. The man raised his head just enough to reveal a square jaw, shadowed with stubble and eyes sunken from dehydration. His voice was hoarse. "Matthew." "Just Matthew?" Tarsk sneered. "No clan, no ship code?" "No ship," Matthew said. "Been walking since Jara Basin, need water and passage through." Koeth tilted his head. "What's in the pack?" "Supplies, personal things." "Empty it," Ulrichs ordered. "Now." Matthew hesitated a heartbeat too long. Koeth grinned. "Maybe he's carrying earth plagues, or more of that peanut butter filth." "Or socks," Tarsk added, mock shivering. "Always with the socks." Matthew slowly unslung the backpack, his motion deliberate, every movement measured. He set it down on the inspection table with a faint grunt, either from effort or pain. He took one small step back, hands open at his sides. Koeth swooped in first. He yanked the flap open and began tossing items out without care. A packet of dried fruit landed with a squish on the floor. A plastic multi-tool rolled off the table's edge and clattered across the floor. A cracked solar charger, a water filter, a stained paperback novel with half the cover torn off. "What even is this garbage?" Tarsk laughed, picking up the book and flipping through it. "These markings, this is writing?" "It's called a novel," Matthew muttered. Koeth held up a battered toothbrush. "Heh, still trying to scrub off your mammal stink?" Tarsk found a small metal canister with faded paint. He shook it. "This rattles. A weapon?" "Trail mix," Matthew said. "Food." The 2 guards doubled over, howling. "Food," Koeth repeated. "Primitive nut clusters." "Oh no, Tarsk, he's going to protein us to death." Even Ulrichs chuckled, arms crossed, watching the pathetic pile grow. "Humans always carry their entire lives on their backs, like hermit crabs without shells." Koeth dug deeper. "What's this?" From the bottom of the pack, he pulled free a neatly folded rectangle of dark, heavy cloth. Unlike the rest of the bag's contents, this item was clean. Vacuum sealed in a thin membrane that had mostly disintegrated but left a lingering sense of care. "Another blanket?" Tarsk groaned. "You cold bloods think everything's a security net." "No," Koeth said slowly. This is something else." He peeled the last of the seal away and let the fabric fall open between his claws. The room froze. It was a deep navy blue with faded panels of camouflage, tan, and obsidian black. The left chest bore a patch, a stylized Earth emblem, the continents etched in gold against a blood-red backdrop. The right side displayed a series of service ribbons, and just beneath them, an alphanumeric designation that only a few non-human species could read. But the insignia on the shoulder said everything. a silver wolf's head biting down on a ring of thorns. Tarsk stumbled back. No, 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 no. Ulrich's mouth twitched. That's not possible. That's Ghost Regimental. Koeth's claws shook slightly. That's a human special forces division, the ones from the Inner Spiral War. They weren't even drafted. They volunteered for that. The silent drone above them kept recording, its optical lens zooming in. Ulrich stepped closer to the table. He picked up the uniform gently this time, fingertips grazing the old tears and burn marks that had been hand-stitched. Some of the stitching was alien, no Terran soldier used filament that flexible. Others had been resealed with field epoxy, clearly in the middle of combat. "Where did you get this?" Ulrich asked, voice low. Matthew looked up for the first time, really looked up. His eyes weren't angry or proud, just tired. "It's mine." Koeth swallowed. "You served?" "I did." Tarsk blinked. How? How are you still alive? Ghost Regimental lost 80% in the Spiral War. 92%, Matthew corrected quietly. Ulrich didn't speak. He simply laid the uniform down with both hands, as if it might break. The other guards backed off, suddenly very aware of how loud they'd been. Koeth glanced at the pile of tossed items. "Should we pack this up again?" Ulrich nodded. "Pack it. All of it. Then bring him water. Medical scan too." "Now." Tarsk stiffened. "Sir, do we salute?" Matthew shook his head, slow and firm. "No need." He took a half step forward, enough to retrieve the uniform. He refolded it with practiced care and slid it back into the backpack, followed by the other scattered items. He moved slower than before, his limp more pronounced. Koeth watched, still pale under his mottled skin. "You walked here from Jara Basin? That's 600 clicks." "Had to avoid the war zone," Matthew said. Ulrich looked him over again. "What happened to your leg?" "Old injury. Reopened." "We'll scan it. You might have a tear or a fracture." "I know. Just let me sit a moment." No one stopped him as he dropped into the shade beside the checkpoint wall, his back pressed to the cool stone. The guards stood awkwardly nearby, suddenly unsure what to do with their hands, their weapons, their breath. Koeth whispered to Tarsk, "Do you think he was at Red Dagger Ridge?" Tarsk didn't answer. The man they'd mocked just moments ago now sat like a storm barely contained, wrapped in silence and cloth stitched with legends. And none of them could look him in the eye. Matthew barely flinched as the medical scanner clicked to life beside him. It hummed over his leg, then moved to his lower back and right arm, pausing with small beeps at each stop. The drone operator didn't dare speak, just logged the damage quietly to a tablet. Ulrich peered over his shoulder. "Torn ligament in the knee," the guard captain muttered. He wasn't limping from exhaustion. Matthew kept his head leaned back against the stone wall. Didn't have time to rest it properly. Thought it'd hold. Ulrich considered that a moment, then gestured toward the main gate. "We've got a medbay. Not much, but it'll do better than dust and luck." "No medics in there for human anatomy," Matthew replied without opening his eyes. "And I'm not letting some undertrained intern reattach tendons with five-finger assumptions. Just ice, compression, and some space to stretch it. I'll handle it." Koeth crouched beside the pack they'd returned to him, arms stiff. "Your gear's intact. Nothing damaged." Matthew gave a small nod, then lifted the pack onto his lap. "Thanks." Ulrich waved Tarsk over. "Get him a compress band and 2 water packets. Cool storage, not the boiled stock." Tarsk obeyed, fast for someone his size. Koeth, still squatting, dared a question. "You really walked 600 clicks with that injury?" Matthew finally met his gaze. 150 was crawling, 30 on one crutch I built from a shuttle panel, rest, slow walking. Koeth blinked, stunned silent. Tarsk returned with the supplies, setting them gently beside Matthew. For once, the guard said nothing. Matthew removed his boot and pushed up the leg of his trousers. The skin was red and swollen around the knee, faintly bruised. He hissed quietly as he wrapped the compress band around the joint. Koeth looked away, unnerved by the raw effort. "You could have transmitted for evac," Ulrich said. "Sent a distress call." "No beacon," Matthew replied. "Didn't want one. I left." "Left what?" Tarsk asked. "The war?" "The service." None of them spoke for a moment. "I wasn't discharged," Matthew added. "I just didn't go back. The transport never came after that last operation. I waited, and when the unit didn't answer, I figured the galaxy had moved on. Ulrich's eyes narrowed. So, you were listed as KIA? Probably, Matthew said with a shrug. They didn't check the tunnels, just glassed the ridge and left. Koeth exhaled sharply. Red Dagger Ridge. You were there. I was under it, 20 meters down, fire tunnels and detonation beds. Whole team died above me. Took me 9 days to dig out, then another 3 weeks to reach something resembling a road. Ulrich stared. No exosuit, no rations? Matthew gave him a tired smile. I had a spoon and 2 socks. Tarsk made a faint choking sound and turned away. For a while, the checkpoint was unusually quiet. Even the comms tower buzzed softer, as if reverence had settled over the equipment. The recording drone hovered farther back, as though embarrassed. Matthew finished wrapping his leg, then rolled his ankle once to test the tension. How long until your convoy leaves? He asked. 5 hours, Ulrich said. Supply transport to the Central Trade Spine, but it's not rated for passengers. I'll stand. Just need to ride. Not asking for favors. Ulrich hesitated. We'll make space. Koeth fidgeted. That uniform, the insignia, those medals. You were given Soul Flame class, weren't you? Matthew didn't respond. You don't have to answer, Koeth added quickly. It's just there were only 12 awarded in the entire campaign, and you had 4 ribbons. Matthew ran a hand over his face. Too many to mean anything now. Still, Tarsk muttered, glancing down. We shouldn't have laughed. Matthew looked up, studying him. You didn't know. Doesn't matter. It does, Tarsk insisted, straightening his back. Where I come from, mocking a warborn is dishonor. Matthew shook his head. I don't need honor, just water. And maybe a convoy that doesn't leak coolant. Koeth tried again. What made you keep it? The uniform? Matthew paused, then tapped the side of his pack. I kept it because I thought I'd need it. In case someone needed proof, I wasn't dead. Ulrich crossed his arms. Funny, everyone here nearly wished you were just another scavenger. Matthew chuckled faintly. You and me both. Hours passed. When the convoy arrived, it did so in a puff of ionized sand and sputtering engines. The cargo hauler looked like it had seen one too many asteroid fields, one of those long-range beasts with modular trailers and external shielding that had to be manually latched down. The driver, a 4-eyed Raxari named Lem, looked annoyed just stepping out of the cockpit. You want me to carry him? She asked Ulrich. He's been cleared. Light baggage. Quiet company. Lem eyed Matthew's leg. He doesn't look light. He's old service, Ulrich said, voice lower than usual. Lem peered closer, then saw the patch. She didn't ask anything else, just nodded once and unlocked the side door of the forward module. Matthew hauled himself up the ramp with care, setting the pack down beside a bolt-fixed bench. He exhaled slowly and sat, gently cradling his knee. Ulrich stood at the edge of the bay, arms folded behind him. What'll you do when you get to the spine? Keep walking, Matthew said. Find a system that doesn't ask questions, somewhere with soil. Ulrich gave a thoughtful nod. If anyone asks what happened here, tell them the truth. A tired man walked too far and needed a ride. The hatch closed with a heavy clunk, sealing away the checkpoint and its accidental reckoning. Inside the transport module, Matthew leaned back. His hands brushed over the folded uniform once more, tucked safely beside him. Not for display, just a reminder. He didn't need to wear it, its weight still clung to him. Outside, the checkpoint resumed its motion. Guards returned to their posts. The gate slid shut. But tension lingered in the air, visible in the way Koeth cleaned his rifle 3 times over, or how Tarsk avoided looking at the bench where Matthew had sat. And Ulrich, standing at the watchtower, kept one eye on the vanishing dust trail long after it disappeared. No one laughed anymore. The convoy moved like a wounded animal through the canyon's slow, loud, and radiating heat from every dented seam. In the lead module, Matthew sat with his leg propped on a ration crate and the compression band re-tightened beneath his cargo pants. The floor vibrated with every gear shift. Bolted restraints rattled overhead like wind chimes in a storm. He had slept in broken stretches since boarding, one hand always near the pack. His knee flared up each time the hauler jolted. He hadn't removed the wrap once. Every few hours, he adjusted it and tested his range of motion with grim patience. The recovery process was no mystery to him. He knew the stages, he knew the pain. But it was the uniform he kept looking at folded perfectly inside the pack, untouched since the checkpoint. Every time his eyes drifted to it, he seemed to brace against something invisible. The past, perhaps. Or the silence it always brought with it. At the next fueling station, the hauler stopped for a 3-hour recharge. It wasn't more than a refitted cargo slab with solar collectors and a merchant's booth half buried in dust. Lem, the driver, stepped down and ordered a lukewarm stimulant from a vending nozzle while the rear tanks hissed. "You hungry?" she called over her shoulder. Matthew shook his head from the bench just outside the ramp. "I've got nutrition packs in the cab," she said. "Most of it's inedible, but the stuff labeled dog tastes okay." Matthew chuckled faintly. "Not hungry." "Suit yourself." Lem leaned against the console. "You used to be Frontlines, right?" Matthew didn't respond. "I only asked 'cause one of the side guards at the last depot recognized the patch," she said. "Didn't say anything, but you could see it in his face." Matthew pulled out a hydration pouch and drank. Let him wonder. Lem shifted. "So, why'd you leave?" The sun passed behind a cloud, casting an odd shade over them. Matthew took a breath. "I didn't. They did. I just stayed put." Lem scratched at a burn mark on her sleeve. "Fair enough." Inside, the hauler beeped fuel cycle complete. She tapped her belt control and boarded again. "We've got 2 more jumps until the spine. You'll want to brace during the surge. This old crate doesn't handle inertia well." "I'll manage." True to her word, the jump jolted hard. Matthew winced as his knee locked up for a full minute after touchdown. He forced himself to stretch it, jaw clenched, sweat beading along his brow. He didn't cry out. Midway through the next segment, a secondary console near the rear compartment pinged softly. He stood slowly, balancing himself with the wall, and limped over to check the source. It was a proximity alert. A ship was trailing them, no ID signature, no trade beacon. That wasn't standard. When he told Lem, she cursed and veered the hauler into a dust pocket to mask their thermal trail. "Pirates?" he asked. "Not bold ones," she said. "Just scavengers looking for easy targets. They won't hit us unless they think we've got military-grade materials. Or someone important." Matthew raised an eyebrow. "You think they traced the uniform?" "It's not like that patch is subtle," she said, checking the rear cams. "And word travels stupid fast out here." They waited 2 hours in that pocket until the trailing ship lost interest and peeled away. Lem muttered about changing her transponder code, then offered Matthew a shock baton, just in case. He took it and tucked it under the bench without comment. The rest of the ride was quiet until the final checkpoint. This one wasn't a border gate, it was a central trade junction hub, a sprawling transit zone that spread across a shallow crater, complete with dock towers, vendor alleys, and temporary barracks. Dozens of species moved about in organized chaos, pilots screaming over manifest discrepancies while loaders haggled over fuel allocations. Lem parked the hauler in Bay 42, then stepped down and stretched her arms overhead. "We're here. Past this point, the lanes get complicated. I'm heading westbound." Matthew stepped out slowly, testing his leg. It held, barely. The swelling had gone down a little, but he'd still need another week at least before he could put weight on it for any distance. Lem looked him over. "You're going to try to walk it from here?" "There's a transport link," he said. "I can ride north for a while. Find something quieter." She hesitated, then held out a wrapped foil pouch. "Take this. It's not dog, I swear. Just don't open it near anyone with gills." He took it with a nod. "Thanks for the ride." She glanced at the pack again. "You gonna keep carrying that thing? The uniform?" He didn't answer right away. "Yeah," he finally said. "I think I have to." She gave a short nod, then walked back up the ramp. Matthew moved slowly into the station. The crowd parted more easily than expected. Some of it was the limp. Most of it was the insignia, peeking just slightly from his half-unzipped pack. Whispers followed him, barely audible, but present. "That's one of them. Wasn't that patch burned off in the Spiral War?" Didn't know any of them were still alive. He avoided eye contact and found a seat in a corner of the transit lodge. A weathered kiosk offered ride schedules, and he booked a short-haul drop-off to a terraforming colony 3 sectors away. No cities, no battlegrounds, just soil and sky. While he waited, a trio of port authorities approached. Their armor bore the orange insignia of neutral regulators, meant to intervene in smuggling or unauthorized tech. "Sir," the lead said, eyes scanning Matthew's frame, "may we speak with you a moment?" He gave a faint shrug. If it's quick. The officer motioned to a scanner. We have a discrepancy. Your identification doesn't match any active records. Probably because it's over 20 years old, Matthew said. Never updated it. You were listed as deceased. I got better. The officer's antennae twitched. You're carrying a restricted emblem. That unit is listed as defunct under classified archival law. Matthew raised an eyebrow. So, now cloth is contraband? It's not the cloth, the officer said. It's what it represents. Matthew unzipped the pack and handed the uniform over, folded. Take a look. There's nothing embedded, no tracking tags, no active comms. The officer turned it over, inspected the patches, noted the field, repairs, and battle damage. Then, without ceremony, handed it back. I've seen this before, he said quietly. My uncle served with a colonial unit on Reshtar. Your people held the flanks after orbital shields collapsed. He never forgot that. Matthew nodded once, re-zipped the pack, and returned to silence. When his transit was called, he stood slowly and limped to the gate. The officer stepped aside, then offered a parting nod, not a salute, just acknowledgement. Matthew didn't return it. He didn't need to. He boarded the transport with no more fanfare. The doors sealed, the engine rumbled. Behind him, whispers still traveled the corridors, bouncing from wall to wall, traveling faster than light. He wasn't famous. But the uniform was. And for most people, that was enough. The transport shuddered on final descent, kicking up clouds of red dust across the outer rim of Colony Elton 9, a fledgling terraforming site clinging to survival on the edge of the Garan wastes. From the sky, it looked like a collection of half-buried shipping containers, each wired to a central atmospheric processor the size of a cargo frigate. Matthew sat near the rear, his pack at his feet. The pressure change made his ears pop. The landing was rough, but his knee held with only a dull throb. That was new, promising. The cabin door slid open with a hiss. He adjusted the strap of his bag and stepped into the heat. Eltan 9 didn't have much to offer: a medical outpost, a supply depot, a communal canteen, and a crop dome fighting to establish root systems. The sky was heavy with sand-borne haze. A few settlers wandered about in dusty overalls, goggles slung around their necks. None of them looked twice at the new arrival. Good. At the registrar tent, a wiry woman in her 50s with sun-creased skin scanned his ID chip with a handheld device. It beeped twice, then displayed a mismatch. Your registration doesn't sync with current grid files, she said. You sure you're cleared for settlement? I've got credits, Matthew replied. Don't need a plot, just a place to stay for a while. Can work if needed. She eyed him. What kind of work? Repair, field engineering, sanitation. Doesn't matter. She handed him a blank token. We don't run like the core colonies. No military preference. You want to eat, you clock hours. Don't start fights. Don't dig holes where we haven't marked. Understood. She glanced at his limp. You good to walk? Enough. She pointed him toward the communal barracks. Bunk 42's empty, don't snore. The bunk creaked under his weight. The mattress was thin and smelled faintly of solvent, but it beat sleeping in dust. Matthew unpacked slowly first, his water filter, then a spare shirt, a rolled tarp, and finally, the uniform. He hesitated. The patch stared back at him like an unblinking eye. He refolded it and placed it carefully beneath the mattress, out of sight. Over the next few days, he fell into rhythm. He reported for maintenance duties, repairing cracked vent seals, rebalancing oxygen scrubbers, resetting faulty pressure gauges. He didn't talk much, but neither did most of the settlers. They were tired people, not disillusioned, just focused. His limp improved, slowly. He still iced the knee at night, still wrapped it each morning. He declined when offered stim shots, knowing they'd only mask the damage, not heal it. By the end of the second week, he could squat low enough to reseal lower ducts without pain. No one asked where he came from. No one needed to. They saw the efficiency in his movements, the way he worked without complaint, how he checked his tools twice before use. That was enough. But then, the transport arrived. It was a private hauler, not supply. Sleek, registered to an off-world diplomat house. It landed without notice, kicked up half the settlement's crop dust, and deployed 2 agents in breathable suits and polished boots. They asked for Matthew by name. Not the name on his chip. His real name. A few settlers watched as he was pulled from a scaffolding rig and led into the temp admin building. Someone whispered, "I told you he looked like Fleet." Inside, the taller agent introduced himself as Commander Bren of the Interstellar Defense Liaison Office. "You've been hard to find," Bren said. "Long-range scans didn't pick up your distress beacon after Ridgefall. You were marked as KIA. Your unit's archive has your memorial listed at the Hall of Glass." Matthew remained seated. "I didn't activate the beacon." "Why not?" "No one was coming." Bren shifted uncomfortably. "We'd like you to return with us. There are questions that only someone from your unit can answer, not just tactical historical. There are diplomatic threads tied to ghost regimental records, testimony, memorial accounts. If you're alive, those records change." "Let them change," Matthew said. "We could reprocess your discharge, honor ceremony, access to benefits." Matthew leaned back. "I've got water. And a place to sleep. That's all I want." The shorter agent finally spoke. "The uniform you carried, it has scorch scoring that doesn't match spiral tech. It matches Varnix plasma. You were at the Gash Truce incident." Matthew's eyes narrowed. "That incident was sealed." "Not anymore. The Varnix broke treaty 2 months ago. There's a new alliance forming. Old soldiers carry weight in the negotiations. You could prevent a second war." He stood, quietly. "You want a face, not a man. We want peace." Matthew shook his head. "Then stop digging up ghosts." He left the room. The agents didn't follow. That night, he sat on the edge of his bunk, pack on his lap. The barracks was empty. Shift rotations had left it quiet. He pulled the uniform free. He looked at it for a long time, not at the patch, but the seams, the uneven stitching, the scorch marks, the faded names on the inner collar, names that weren't his. They were gone. But the weight remained. The next morning, the agents had left. Their ship dust trailed into orbit before sunup. No one asked why. No one needed to. Matthew reported for duty as usual. The registrar gave him a new work order turbine realignment. By the end of the week, he stopped wrapping his knee. By the end of the month, he started jogging short laps at dawn. One night, during power rationing, a group of settlers gathered in the canteen. Someone had found an old entertainment deck. They projected static-ridden music and laughed at each other's dancing. Matthew watched from a corner, sipping weak broth. Koeth would have made a joke, he thought. Tarsk would have started stomping like an armored beast. Ulrix would have said nothing, but would have smiled anyway. Months passed. He never wore the uniform again. But he never discarded it. Sometimes, young settlers asked about his limp. He told them the truth of fall during repair work, long ago, before terraforming made gravity stable. Other times, someone would knock on his bunk door at night, quiet and hesitant, and ask, "Is it true?" He'd listen. But he never told them stories. Because stories grow larger than truth, and he knew what that weight could do to a man. Years later, when a new fleet passed through orbit, its captain requested a meet with the Ghost. Matthew declined. But he sent a message instead, 3 words. "Let the soil grow." And it did. Because sometimes, the greatest act of endurance isn't surviving the war. It's choosing to live after it.